but my statements stand. Essentially, my statements stand.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ken.
Just a little quick comment on that. I went through the packet and I decided to do some Googling. So the statements were, it's like an IRS audit. It's very subjective. It's not a fact that it's one and the same. It's likened to, so it's a very subjective statement. And some of these comments that, the package that Ken put together, it said, you can Google this or that. And those are very subjective statements. So it's, as an enforcement, it is not enforcement, it is a document request, as I stated before. Could enforcement come from that? Absolutely. Or no enforcement can come from it once we submit all the documents. So it's not enforcement. It is just a ask for information. And I think right now there's probably several dozen landfills across the country that are going through the same thing right now. So it's just not focused on us.
Thanks. Yeah. Related to that, I can just read out. So Bailey had a communication with Sarah Conley at the EPA about this, because we've been seeing these media reports, and he quoted, I think EPA Director Reagan, who was saying, I can't comment on what's happening with Republic. There's an active case in Oregon, and we're laser focused on this case.
Right.
And so Bailey asked Sarah, what is going on? And she basically said, he is correct. But then she cited this very large program, the National Enforcement and Compliance Initiative, which sounds very much nationwide and kind of routine. So
it is very routine. It is very routine. Process.
The communication, their level of communication about this has made it very difficult to figure out what's going on.
Understood.
Okay. If there aren't any. Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, we know that the recording just started. Hopefully we'll sort out minutes. If there aren't any other public comments, I'm going to move on to anything else. All right, I'm going to move on to reviewing the last meeting's minutes and action items. Did everyone get a chance to look through those? Any notes or corrections?
I just have one.
Yeah.
There's a question mark behind my name, and it's probably a credible question mark, but it says absent. I may have been here in body, but not mind, but I would prove that I was here.
Yeah, that's my fault, because I didn't actually do a roll call at the beginning.
I passed the test for finding it.
All right, so Chuck was present. I believe Brent was present, but arrived late. If I remember right.
Brent was present.
He was present. And then Jeff was not, because his last meeting was the meeting before.
And I guess
it's still on there.
Yeah.
I did vote on that, but you didn't hear me. Back later on, you said that I didn't vote on something we were doing.
Oh, okay.
But that was the disruption of the internet system.
Yeah.
I apologize for that.
That's okay. I'm glad you're able to make it in person. Makes things a lot easier. All right, any other notes on the minutes? All right, in that case, I'll entertain a motion to approve
I
them.
move we approve the minutes as written with the adjustment for Gilbert's attendance.
I second.
Thanks. All those in favor? All right, unanimous, very exciting. There are a few action items at the end. Jennifer is going to give us a presentation on PFAS, but I think at the next meeting in April, or it's April already, May. And then Paul, I think you were going to look into a hydrology consultant.
Yeah, so I reached out to our current one. I asked them to look, dive through some data. Obviously, it's quite a bit of data, so they're not ready yet. I checked, so it's going to take some time because it's their first year doing it. So
yeah,
there's quite a bit of data that we want to try to parse out. So it'll take a little bit to get what we want. So
okay, sounds good. So the idea is eventually they'll come in and they'll give us a
presentation. I don't know if they'll come in because they're not really local. They're usually a couple hours away, so we have to schedule, fly them in, and everything else. The closest one's an hour and a half away.
Okay.
So it'll be a challenge. He had said, I know you said you knew Eric, and I don't know if you'd reach out to him.
I did, I was gonna report on that, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Do you think the consultant might be able to do an online presentation since we have Zoom?
I'll talk to him and see if there's some capacity to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just think it would be nice to be able to ask some questions.
Yeah.
Okay, I did start a Google Doc to talk about the expansion proposal, which ended up being kind of a difficult thing because of meeting rules. So we had to kind of revise things on the fly, but we'll get to that in the second half. And then I think that's pretty much everything. Dave, do you want to give us an
Want me
update
to
on
just
your?
give a brief,
Yeah,
it'll be very brief. Yeah, so Eric Tuppen, who has been the consultant so he said he's been working on this project since 1992, quite a while.
Mhm.
And Eric and I go back professionally quite a ways. We're about the same vintage. So, yeah, anyway, we caught up and I just had some general questions about the design and the evolution of the design of the monitoring system. And, Eric did what I thought he would do, what I would do. He supported what has been done out there, and I didn't have any reason to refute that. So I also did a deepest dive as I felt I wanted to do with that data, and there is a ton of data. And to get up to speed on all of this stuff will take quite a bit of time. But it was good to catch up with Eric. Good guy and credible hydrogeologist for sure.
Was there any, I know one of our communications from last meeting was to see if he would come in potentially.
Oh, he made that very clear. I said, I'm not working, I'm retiring. He said, I presented to this group before. He said, no, thank you. I said, I can't ask you in an official capacity. He said, well, if somebody does, I will say no, just because he's done.
okay, got it.
And I figured that.
Yeah. Robert, by way of background, at the last meeting, we identified a few priorities to look at related to the landfill, and one of them is groundwater. So we have lots of hydrology questions that we'll continue looking at.
Yeah, it's definitely common. One thing I've gained an appreciation for is the complexity of it, with that groundwater divide right in the middle of the site and those really tight clays on top of fractured basalt. It is complicated.
Okay, so next up on the agenda, we have Paul Midfield. Do you want to come up and remind us what you've been doing?
Hi, I'm Paul Neathfeld, North Benton County resident, retired engineer, and I worked on the A1 subcommittee of BCPT, which was the size, capacity, and longevity subcommittee. Bailey's got a little PowerPoint presentation we can walk through. Basically, what we're trying to do here is provide the accounting folks, the financial folks in Benton County, and you guys in DSAC access to more timely intake data for three reasons. And those reasons are, number one, so that the size of the host fee can be verified on an annual basis. Number two is so that the next year's host fee could be projected in advance based on quarterly reports filed with ODEQ. And thirdly, for DSAC to allow more timely monitoring, more up-to-date monitoring of the intake over the calendar year vis-a-vis the intake cap, which will be in place unless and until the expansion is approved. So there are a lot of definitions in that report that I gave, and hopefully you guys are familiar with all those. I'm going to dive down into a few little details here once we get that presentation up, if it's available. Is that available, Bailey, or I'll just wing it here if you need to?
No, it is.
Okay. So while he's doing that, let me give you just a quick background. What we learned over the course of LU 21047 and in BCTT is that the landfill revenue is keenly monitored by our Benton County staff, commissioners, and the financial people. Even though it's only about 1%, 1.6% of the budget, It constitutes about 7.5% of the general revenue, the discretionary fund, which is really important to those folks. And what has happened over the past year is because of incentives that were built into the landfill franchise agreement to encourage Benton County to approve expansion, the franchise fee, which is a fixed fee that's paid on an annual basis, doled out in 1/12 increments by month, the franchise fee has dropped from 3.5 million last year to $2.5 million this year, which means the monthly payments that Benton County is receiving now have dropped by about 30%. However, the determining factor over the past several years, and we believe it's going to be true going forward based on guidance we got in the BCTT subcommittee, was the host fee actually ends up dominating and determining the payment to the county. If you toggle to the next slide, I'll walk through that. So there are two fees calculated. One of them is a flat fee, that's franchise fee. The other is host fee. This is a per ton fee based on a carefully defined solid waste term in the landfill franchise agreement. And that fee, because the volumes were running, is what has actually determined the payout to the county in the past 4 years, and we expect that will be the case going forward. The unfortunate thing here, though, is that the size of the host fee in advance is not known by the finance department. And let's take this year, for example, because the franchise fee has dropped down, but intake volumes are still high. I'm expecting that probably the host fee paid in January will be on the order of $1.1 million, but we have no formal way of knowing that because volumes are not reported month by month. They only come out with the Coffin Butte annual report, which is released typically in sometime in Q2, often late Q2 the following year. So for example, for 2024, to the best of my knowledge, we have not yet received the Coffin Butte annual report. Is that correct? So, and yet the host fee for last year has already been paid. So there's a bit of a timing and visibility problem. And there's also a granularity problem. If you toggle to the next slide, I think we can kind of walk through some of that. The timing problem is the host fee amount is not known prior to the January payment. The solid waste intake tonnage figure isn't available until Q2, so there's no way for our accounting staff to know what's coming in that January payment. And the franchisee is no longer required as part of the landfill franchise agreement to do timely reports, if you will, or at least monthly or quarterly reports of the intake volume. But there is another source of data. And that is the solid waste disposal reports that the franchisee files with ODEC on a quarterly basis. And so there's a lot of setup here. I apologize for that, but that leads to the question of how can host fee tonnage, which is the tonnage of solid waste taken in over a year, be determined, if it can, from the ODEC solid waste disposal reports. And it sounds like a simple question, but it turns out the answer is fairly complicated. There are apparently a lot of factors. I think the franchisee has indicated that there's no exact calculation available. But I'm still searching for a way to give the finance folks and you guys better visibility on the intake volumes. So Bailey, if you toggle to the next one, just to be clear, the advantages of being able to do this would be Benton County would be able to verify the payment that they got for the previous year based on these ODEC reports, kind of an independent channel of reporting. So a little trust but verify type thing going on there. They could project forward what they expect the host fee to be for the next year. And you guys in DSAC would have more timely data to kind of monitor the intake volume with respect to the intake tonnage cap. And this plot is probably too fine to read, but you can see at a very high level the gap up in the year 2016 to 2017. There was a huge increase in intake rate during those years. And since we stepped up, we've actually been running pretty close to the intake tonnage cap of 1.1 million tons defined in the 2020 landfill franchise agreement. And so I have to tell you, as a resident of that area, that gap up had a big impact on kind of the tenor of that facility. It's really stepped it up to a very high-level operational industrial site kind of flavor, if you will. And so as a resident, I want to be careful to monitor, and it looks like the franchisee so far has been very careful to keep the volumes below the intake tonnage cap. But if we can take the ODEQ data and analyze that on a quarter by quarter basis, you guys will have visibility in terms of how volumes so far this year, for example, are tracking last year. So I still think it's a worthy endeavor, even if it's a little complicated to get there. And I think it will be a useful tool for you and for the accounting people. So next. So here's what we found, and the franchisee might want to comment on this. It turns out a pretty simple equation, I think, gets us pretty close to a good estimate for what I call the intake tonnage. And that is, you take the total tons received in the reporting period, which is an ODEC figure in their report, add in the sewage sludge, and then subtract out the alternate daily cover qualified waste. And again, I'm sure the franchisee will want to comment on this very simplified equation here as far as its accuracy. But in the table below, and this is also included in the report, I actually ran that equation to estimate what the calculated host fee tonnage would be, and then compared the expected payout from that compared to the actual payout that the county actually received for the first 4 years of this landfill franchise agreement. And the result is pretty close. For example, in 2021, it was right on the mark. 2022, we didn't have sufficient data because the ODEQ reports are missing a page. But for the other 2 years, the results came in pretty close. And in fact, for 2025, we can take this same methodology here and project what the size of the total payout will be. So we're expecting total revenue for this calendar year to be on the order of $3.6 million. The thing that's interesting about that to the commissioners, should they be sitting here, and to the accounting people, is the total of the monthly payments, again, will only be $2.5 million this year. So if the total payout for this calendar year is to be $3.6 million, that means the size of the host fee expected in January would be on the order of $1.1 million. I understand to the franchisee, that's probably very small money. To Benton County, it's considered big, important money. So I think this will be a useful tool, and unless the franchisee believes that it's misleading or egregiously erroneous to use such a simplified calculation for our estimates going forward, I think Bailey is prepared to take those ODEC reports and provide analysis of that, basically run them through this equation, update you guys, and update the finance guys on a quarterly basis. So that's basically it. There's a few recommendations, one of which was actually suggested by county council, and that is to provide, DSAC may consider requesting that the franchisee provide a strict, comprehensive definition of solid waste vis-a-vis what is reported to ODEC. And what that means is, if you take the ODEC, the gross figures that are reported to ODEC, exactly what all needs to get subtracted out of there to arrive at the figure that's used to calculate the host fee. So this is a bit down in the weeds. I apologize for the detail, but hopefully it would be helpful if we can arrive at an answer that everyone agrees on. I hope it would be useful to not only the finance folks, but to you guys here in DSAC.
Thank you, Paul.
Questions?
Dave?
I just kind of step way back here because I'm still kind of getting my head wrapped around the process. Paul, how did this get initiated? Your look into this, it's very interesting. And how is this working with Bailey? Is this a county-driven thing, or
No, it wasn't a county-driven
Okay,
thing. I think Bailey will say that it was driven by me, and that would be correct. And the reason is, I've kind of monitored this closely since LU 21047, and I was always struck by the fact that the county does not get data on the previous year's intake until approximately the middle of the following year. And that's always been kind of frustrating because the scale data is right there, and so that time lag has always bothered me. And then I figured out that the fastest way to figure out how much volume came in the prior year was to look at the size of the host fee payment, kind of reverse calculate what the host fee tonnage was. So once I got to that point, it seemed that if we could more continuously, or at least at finer granularity, monitor the host fee tonnage throughout the year, that would be a help to not only finance people, but also to DSAC in terms of tracking the intake volume.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Paul or Brett, do you think that Paul's formula makes sense? Do these calculations?
I'm not a finance person, but based on the emails back and forth, we stand by our numbers, what we do, because we checked them, I think, 4 or 5 times and ran through everything. And it's hard to quantify some of this and like, if you want granularity and list everything, I don't think it's possible on this little stuff. There's a big swath of information, like what DEQ says, that's not considered countable. So, and that's a wide range of information that I think DEQ probably has on their website, and we follow our permit, what we can take and what we count and when it goes through the scales. So there's stuff that goes through the scales, like our wood waste that goes to PRC. It doesn't count into our landfill. So all that stuff, even though you try, and then when you try to back calculate it, you're going to miss a lot of that stuff. So I've seen the spreadsheets that our finance manager has triple, quadruple checked, and we stand by our numbers, what we do. So
yeah, I don't doubt that. I was just looking for a way for Benton County to kind of independently verify that. Not trying to be confrontational.
Yeah.
No.
I was just trying to.
Paul, sorry, my question, I didn't formulate my question very well, but I was basically asking whether Paul's formula is a good proxy in the absence of not being it,
Without diving into it myself, I can't really speak to it because I don't know enough about how all that's calculated. I'm not a finance person, so it's really hard for me to quantify that right now with that, because there's so much that goes into it.
Bailey here. I personally do think it's a good proxy. I think it gets us close to understanding, what the actual numbers were, so that I wouldn't expect that it's going to be spot on every time, but it gives us a rough idea and will help to provide more updated reporting to the DSAC and our financial folks.
What's your margin of error when you do the calculations? What's your p-value? I mean,
so far we think it will be within 1%.
Oh, that's okay. So I mean, that'd be good to see on the graph.
I put that in the report.
On a piece. So what's that reliability on that? So that's 1% is, I guess. Yeah. Now, if you say 1%, that's pretty good as a proxy. Now I could say it's probably good as a proxy, but I didn't know what the error was.
Yeah, and we would be careful to point that out to the finance people, and then DSAC, of course, would be aware of it. And then the fallback is if the calculation ever yielded a surprising result, obviously that would trigger dialogue. That's the expectation.
I have been looking through what types of waste are non-counting waste as opposed to counting waste. So most of what goes to Coffin Butte is counting waste, but there are many categories of things that don't apply towards the cap. And so, I could talk more about it, but there are about 75 or so different types of materials that get classified as they come across the scales and get flagged as non-counting waste in the reporting. So getting to in the past, I think early on, I gave a presentation to the group and I showed some graphs showing how much was coming into Coffin Butte. And in 23, I believe it was, my numbers indicated that they had exceeded the 1.1 million cap. But when I factored out all of those non-counting wastes, it's been consistently near the 1.1 million cap in the last several years, or a handful of years, but it hasn't exceeded it.
Hand in hand with that, though, it's important to keep with all the waste that goes into the field because of the service life. So the falsity here, if you're looking at the money and not the service life, your landfill dies on you. Where do you go with the garbage?
And that's a recommendation that Paul had
Right,
made.
yeah, just to speak up, Chuck, if you look at recommendation 2, I would suggest humbly that this committee consider asking the franchisee if they would be willing to report both the solid waste, which is a subset of the intake, as well as the gross intake in the Coffin Butte annual report. I suspect that reporting may have changed in the past few years. I think in older years, the total intake, because that's what's used to calculate the used volume, essentially based on the density, packing density factor. I think they reported the total intake, but now they're being careful to report the solid waste intake, which is what counts toward the cap, as well as what counts towards calculating the host fee. But I think both figures are useful to Benton County.
There's a density in there too that's a variable.
Correct.
But
Yes.
but it still can be a proxy
Yeah.
based on last year's.
Thanks. And Paul, you mentioned that I think you mentioned that the cap on the total amount of intake will go away if the expansion proposal is approved. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's clearly defined in the 2020 landfill franchise agreement.
Okay.
And I will say that when I testified to that, to SWAC back in 2021, they were very surprised and almost disbelieving, but County Council has been very willing to answer my questions on that, and he's confirmed that that is the mechanism that's defined in the landfill franchise agreement. So if expansion onto the expansion parcel is approved, which is what this CUP currently before us would do, then the intake tonnage cap is eliminated. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Paul? Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate all your work
Thank
here.
you for your time.
All right, we have one more item on the agenda before we take a break, which is to talk about the work that David Hackelman has been doing with the Republic folks, and I think Adair as well, fire safety on the fire safety at the site.
Okay.
And just
Would you
to-
like me to-
Yeah, do you want me to like intro what you were doing or? Well, I was going to say the last instruction we got was from the county commissioners to provide some concrete recommendations for them, some informed recommendations on what should be done in consultation with the Republic.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody that showed up for the meeting that we had hosted by Republic at the facility a couple of weeks ago, where we discussed the topic of fire safety and what we could do to ensure that the local fire department, which is a rural fire department, has the best opportunity to get to any event should it take place at the landfill. And I really appreciate all the information that came from everybody. The conclusion, I'm not going to go through the details, it's in the record, but the conclusions, I think, are pretty straightforward. And there's one that I'm going to, first of all, I think that we believe that action should be performed especially during times when the landfill is not staffed, okay? That ensure that there's a way to observe any eruptions of fire should they take place, and especially during times in which the surrounding areas are subject to easy combustion due to dryness or fire season. So that seemed like a good thing to do. And the people that know what that timing is the Adair Rural Fire Department. They can notify when it's important to watch. And there's kind of two directions we can go on, too many directions we can go to do this. One of them is to have people observe, aside from requesting only the general public to observe, but at least some expected observations to, on a periodic basis during the time that the landfill is not in operation, to see if any fire has started. And that's one way, and that's by using human resources to do it. And then we also discussed, opened the subject of seeing if we can find something that is less intensive for people to be on site or something, and that includes the use of video equipment. And I noticed that it says here we believe that action should be performed to better empower the fire department. That's the first summary step. And the second one is that we can look into the use of extended devices. We're kind of looking for things that are very reliable and will alert some kind of a personnel to see if there's an issue. And that alert can go either, for example, to the fire department or to people within the organization, depending upon what we decide. And it's mentioned here that we could look at forward-looking infrared video cameras. I actually think that any video camera is probably adequate to look for something like that. And there are also, you can go all the way up on the ladder of complexity to things that are totally autonomous and will look for fires, detect them, and then go put them out. But I'm not sure that that is going to be cost effective. And I think that that's kind of where we set it at. Now we're doing the exploration process to see what other options beyond having people observe for us during the fire season are. And I want to thank Brett for putting together the summary that's below the summary of the notes from him, which is below my summary. And it includes a few action items that I just kind of talked over just now. So if anybody has any questions about this or wants to contribute, they're welcome. The objective is to ensure that in the event an eruption of fire takes place in the landfill area, that it doesn't propagate outward. But at the same time, we might enjoy the opportunity to observe fires that may not be in the landfill area that could propagate inward or outward through the same sets of equipment.
I want to mention, so something's come up since previously our discussion on this, but we're also looking at, we've had a few incidences on site with people coming in when they're not supposed to be there, causing issues. So we're looking at security. This can be twofold: security and basically observing the site, driving around, not only us, but PRC, just going back and forth. So that basically takes care of two things. So that's another option that we're looking into right now as well. So having eyes on the ground, having someone there is probably the most expeditious way to handle this than trying to set up a camera and making sure all that equipment is running. But that's an option we're exploring as well, just so you know.
Okay, so Paul mentions that there's more than one reason that it might be useful to have individuals around because the landfill and the PRC areas are both basically regions that are supposed to be private and not have people trespassing during off hours. So perfectly correct.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Thanks very much. I enjoyed having the meeting with you all, and we'll see if we can't work together to improve the fire safety.
Thanks, David. The cameras that you mentioned as a possible thing to install, would they automatically detect a blaze, or would you have to have somebody monitoring the video footage?
Well, Rachel, the question about the cameras is kind of open-ended because right now the Forest Service uses camera systems here and there throughout South and Southern Oregon and other forestry areas. And one of the things we're going to do is find out what they are using and find out whether or not it is applicable. Okay, so there are some cameras that can detect if there's an intense infrared emission, which usually means that there's a fire, and then it might alert human eyes to observe it either through that camera or actually showing up. So I don't know that we've really decided on that because What we don't want is to get something that is so complicated that we spend all our time fixing it. Okay, so that's kind of the way we want to keep from having happen. I would suspect that the Forest Service has gotten beyond that themselves. Because there are very few people in lookouts these days to look for forest fires. It's more done automatically.
Okay. And David, what do you think should happen next? Like, do you think we should update the board or should we wait and see?
I think that it would be beneficial to the commissioners to know that we are actively seeking improved ways to ensure that there's no fire issues. Because most of them probably remember that there was a fire outbreak or two in the last year or two. And that we're going to do our best to ensure that we're a little bit better at this than we were in the past.
Okay.
So if you like, would you like me to write something to send to the board? But if I do, I think the team would probably like to review it before it got sent. I don't know.
If anyone has any strong opinions about it, I'd be very happy to eliminate the bureaucracy and just deputize you to write basically what you wrote in this updating the meeting packet.
With my partners, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay.
It may make sense to wait a little bit until a decision has been made about how it's going, be it a fire lookout that's there for an hour or two after it closes, or if it's night security, or if it's cameras, before going to the board. I mean, I think it takes a couple more months to get some sort of strategy together. That would be fine.
But I think the basis of this thing was, they're asking, should we just do a middle kind of, hey, this is where we are with this, to kind of let them know, hey, we're moving forward. We're not, so they're not wondering.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're going with that.
I'm
We haven't made a decision, but we're moving forward. We're actively doing it. So.
Yeah, I mean, the last time we gave them many options, including like drones and rovers that would come over the site. So it might be helpful to just check in and see.
Yeah, I don't think they were aware, or they currently are aware that we actually had a meeting. So it'd be nice to kind of update.
I don't know if the commissioners are at all aware of what we've done.
I don't think so.
So I think it's just an update.
I think it's good to point out that we're working hard to cooperate to ensure that there's a level of observation and reaction to potential fires.
Yeah.
And our fire season is around the corner.
Yes, it's coming
It'd be
shortly.
nice to move this along and have something in place, because that is one of our biggest risks. So just abductions. So
It would be nice
the fire season coming.
if there were like a timeline or a time frame for making the decision about how you're going to,
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that internally.
yeah.
Sure.
But that would probably be helpful so the Board of Commissioners at least know what kind of timeframe.
Each different option could be a different timeline based on, you could probably hire someone quicker than ordering a FLIR camera and getting that set up and training people on how to understand that. That could be months based on availability. If we
It
can
might
get
be
the
a
parts now.
two-step solution, put boots on the ground while you're trying to work out the technical
Right.
thing, and then give up on the human.
Yeah, we'll discuss it internally and.
Okay,
Figure out what
well,
we're
I
doing.
can send a note either shortly, or I can wait until you've had your discussion internally as to what you plan to do in the short term. If you want to do that, it's okay.
Well, we won't be able to talk till next month, so it's up to
Okay.
you guys if you want to.
Well, I could point out that there's going to be an internal discussion within.
And I will provide an update.
In the next month.
I will provide an update where we stand next month as we. get
Yeah,
into this.
that would be quite adequate for them too,
Okay,
to know that progress is being made.
right.
Okay,
Great.
so I'll try to write something up. It'll take me a couple days because I'm slow, but I'll do my best.
All right. Well, thank you.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
Is that something that Bailey can update the commissioners on as well?
Yes.
Because that seems like that sort of, the face-to-face might be more effective than a letter, or both.
Would you like me to send, or you want to do it yourself and just let us know that you've done it, Bailey?
Either way, I'm happy to do it.
When will you be seeing the commissioners next?
If it's by email, you know, as soon as I get it, if I'm talking to them in person, it'd probably be at one of their goal setting meetings. And they have those every other week.
Okay, so within the next 2 weeks.
Yes.
But what if I send you a note with a couple of points and then recommend you present it to them at your next meeting with them?
Okay.
Does that seem good for the team?
Yeah, that seems good.
I'm trying to avoid overloading the commission with random events. You know, it's better to give them a connection.
I think they're going to be real pleased to hear about the way it worked with the DSAC, a DSAC member working collaboratively with Republic Services, and in this case, the fire department. I think that's how they would like to see DSAC operate, is collaboratively with the franchisee.
Sure. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, David and Paul and Brett for working on that together. All right, so we are going to take a 5-minute break now. We'll meet back here at 7:05. All right, I'm going to bring us back to order. I'm going to turn on my microphone and bring us back to order. So we only have one item on the agenda really for the second half of this meeting, which is to sort out what we would like to do regarding the conditional use permit, the expansion proposal for the landfill. So at the moment, NROC is providing their own input into the expansion proposal straight to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has opened a public comment period and will be holding at least one hearing, which we have been invited to participate in some way. We're still sorting out exactly how. We can also put together a report for the Planning Commission if we so choose. But we kind of need to do most of our deliberation in this meeting. We can't do it offline or asynchronously really as a full committee, because it violates state rules about deliberation in public meetings, public entities. So what I'm hoping we can do in the second half of the meeting is figure out what we would like to do. You know, we always have the fallback option of kind of offering our own input individually. I mean, we can do this regardless as individuals. We can offer public comment on the expansion proposal. But as a group, we need to figure out if we want to offer input. And it sounds like the Planning Commission would welcome it, given how much domain expertise we have. So I don't know if anyone has any ideas for how to start this. Does anyone have any strong feelings about whether we should provide input or not? Yeah, Chuck.
Well, it's pretty structured in the sense that the Planning Commission has a small criteria to look at the land use. And reciprocally, the DEQ has a lot bigger context to look at all the engineering perspective of everything. So Alan lays really a philosophical question that we may be able to put forward is, what's tomorrow going to look like? So in a sense is, we're always talking about the surface life of Coffin Butte and its mortality, I guess we might say. So reciprocally, we know that we have the best landfill in the Willamette Valley, but it may have a shorter service life, whether this one goes through or the next one goes through. So I guess I'm saying is we could look at the same criteria everybody else is going to put in, and that is already being answered by about 20 or 30 committees already with environmental issues, everything else. So I was just trying to take a little different angle on it. If it has.
So are you saying, because the expansion would remove the cap on the amount of waste it can accept, the lifetime would be quite short?
Yes, it
Okay.
shortens that.
Yeah.
So, but does that provide for more area to expand into? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think the Willamette Valley is limited, so.
Yeah, well, let me back up a minute. So the planning commission is going to use very specific criteria to assess whether to approve or deny the proposal. And it's all grounded in the county land development code and the comprehensive plan. So, I mean, what we could do is just use those criteria to structure a conversation. So there are two criteria. One is that it doesn't seriously interfere with uses on adjacent property, with the character of the area or the purpose of the zone. The purpose of the zone is kind of mixed. And that the proposed use does not impose an undue burden on any public improvements, facilities, utilities, or services available to the area.
When you said purpose of the zone, what is meant by that?
I'm not entirely sure. I believe by zone, they just mean the area around the property in question.
Okay.
I don't think they mean like a
I look at it
legal
as a zone is what they did in 1983 when they passed a landfill zone out there, because it's defined as a zone that looks like a cross out there. That's what they initially moved on. And then along with one of the franchise agreements, not only did it accept that, but then they put in a criteria that they would have to go through a land zone change or land zone action to get the next expansion in. So I'm just kind of looking at it from a philosophical position there, because it's being answered by everybody else. And I don't know if we can give credible answers to everything where everybody's given it already. I don't know. I fall to you. What?
Okay, I'm going to try a different tack. So I think maybe the best thing we can do is just kind of like figure out where we're all at individually right now with regard to the expansion proposal. So just to kind of like get a baseline of like the temperature of the room. So we can either do a very simple binary straw poll, like who thinks that it should be approved or not, or we can just go around the table and just talk about our perspective. Does anyone have a strong preference either way? All right, why don't we just go around the room? Yes, wait, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think it's inappropriate for a Republic representative to weigh in on this issue. I think probably the Republic representative should excuse himself from the discussion.
You have not given me a chance to decline or abstain from everything, so let this process, understandable, but I am going to abstain. I'm not going to involve all myself in this, so it's okay, no problem.
I think.
But I still am part of this committee, but I can abstain
Yeah.
and to stay here and try to answer general broad questions that they're not unsure of that I know that I can answer, so.
I think we're a committee, so if we're gonna talk about things as a committee, we have to be a committee.
Yes.
So I don't think anybody should leave if, on this topic, just.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you'd like us to, I think, I'll bring up my kind of thoughts about it. See, and I don't know how much of this the committee presents. I think each individual in the county, and especially those that received the letter in the mail like I did, which says, adjacent landholder thing, should be given the opportunity to present material to the planning commission. That's the way we do things around here. In general, I'll start off with kind of a philosophy, and you guys can either shoot it down or not. It's okay. But I think that we as a society throw away stuff, and we throw it away into landfills. Okay, so we haven't learned how to not do that at this point. some areas of society have done a better job at dealing with their waste materials than others, but basically that's what we do in our society. Okay, so I don't think that landfills are going to disappear from the planet for a long time. But I do feel that people should be a bit more, I know that the amount of refuse that I put in the landfill on an annual basis is far lower than what I hear is the average. And that's because I kind of behave like my family has for generations, and we don't throw away a lot of stuff, and that may be good or bad. But we tend to reuse, and we tend to compost, and we tend to only put things in the landfill or the garbage that we have no way of dealing with. So it'd be nice if we can educate the organization towards that direction, but in the meantime, we have landfills, and that's perfectly fine. But I do feel that the less aware an area is that they have a landfill, the more difficult it is for them to be convinced that they need to work through a solution that's beyond what they have today. So from a landfill expansion standpoint, I'm kind of feeling that we're opening the avenue for other areas to stop dealing with the problem. Okay, whereas I think that we're going to have this landfill for a long time, that's perfectly fine. But that if we accept refuse from everywhere and it keeps expanding in area, that fewer and fewer of society in this region are going to be aware that they need to take some kind of action. Now, there's another option so I'm kind of schizophrenic on this, and that's because there are areas in which the desire would be that they receive all landfill materials because they have designed systems that are effective to take vast quantities, and it's in areas where there's less biodegradation. But I don't know if that's a better solution. Okay, and there have been directions towards that here and there. But as a committee, we are kind of looking at the landfill and seeing seeing what impacts we need to concern ourselves about to ensure that our county and our inhabitants of the county have the quality of life that they wish to have. So I'm kind of roundabout, but like I said, that's why fire suppression was important. And I thought that it'd be nice to have a solution to that. There may be other things. I think there are a few other things that we need to at least address and see if we can ensure that they're not deleterious to the environment beyond the landfill. And that's where I like to see our committee focus on. And that's where we take action and help resolve any potential issues or existing issues. So I don't know whether we as a committee need to send something out. But if we do, we may want to send it out based upon kind of our charter as to what we're supposed to be working on. That's kind of where I'm at.
Hold on, Chuck. Did anyone else have any input? Chuck?
I do. I wanted to say that I think Chuck raised a good point that there needs to be, when this is full, we need another place. Where is that going to be? And looking to the future. So that's one thing that I think is really important. Two, I think David is amazingly eloquent. If you take the landfill away from people's faces, when it used to be just in your backyard, when you used to burn garbage in your backyard, which I remember too, people just didn't pay attention. People don't pay attention if the landfill's not in their face. So that's another thing that has to be considered. I wonder what the chair of the planning commission, the ex-chair, recommends, because I would like to see what they would like to hear from DSAC. We don't have a solid waste advisory committee anymore. Yes, NRAC already finished and has already made recommendations as far as the CUP, and we'll send a letter next week. But that has nothing to do with whether this committee says something to the effect of, we are looking at the end of the life of the landfill at some point, whether it's, you know, related to the CUP not being expanded, or whenever it fills, whatever is there now, or whether the CUP somehow gets approved. What the DSAC is concerned about is, where is it going to be next? So that's kind of to Chuck's point. And also, I guess I'm really interested in what the former chair had to say. The planning commission would be useful for us to weigh in on.
Okay, I'm gonna, thank you, Charlie. I want to do a little bit of role playing. I want everybody, well, internal role playing. I want everybody to imagine they're on the planning commission, all right? They've got these very specific criteria in front of them. They are imagining, they have to make a yes or no decision on a very specific thing, right? Like, I hear all of your input, and I mean, it's all really great points, but I'm just trying to make sure we stay focused. Like, they have to make a yes or no decision based on very specific criteria. What do you think they would want to hear from us? Maybe what they would want to hear from us is, this is, you know, we have a certain opinion about what this, you know, what the expansion is going to do with, in terms of the rate of trash. Maybe we focus on that, and like lifting the cap is going to, you know, there are things that it's going to do, shorten the lifetime of the landfill, push the problem down the road, whatever the case may be. But like, I want us to just kind of squarely focus on what we can do that would be helpful to the planning commission. Like, there are a ton of like philosophical questions we can ask about the nature of trash, but like what they have in front of them is a very specific ask that they've got to approve or reject on very specific criteria. Everything else is not actionable. Like, they might prefer that we ship all of our trash to Eastern Oregon, but that's not part of, they can't make a decision based on that feeling.
No, but they can suggest it. They can suggest that an alternative site be started to be, and I'm sure that that's something that Republic Services has to consider, is where are they going to put the trash next, because they provide a service. Eventually is going to cap. If it caps after the cell that's being filled right now, if the CUP is denied, then that's 6 years from now. What is the plan? Where's the next landfill going to be? Obviously, our current landfill is sitting on wetlands. It does not belong there. That's a zone issue. That affects the surrounding area. It's not, we are not inventing or deciding that. That was decided a long time ago by accident. But I don't know that DSAC has a role in saying that, because we comment on the siting of the landfill, but I don't know that we can do anything about the existing landfill. All we can do is cap it.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie, you make a good point. I mean, one thing we can do is not weigh in with an opinion one way or the other, but just share information that would help them. And maybe that information is,
I think that's it.
what is the lifetime of the landfill going to be with or without this expansion?
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I listened, David, to what you said, and I thought it was well stated as well. I have similar feelings, is that I think the reason, I'll speak for myself, I'm here is because, yeah, I do care about the character of Benton County. I've lived here for almost 40 years now and raised 3 kids and grandkids now, and I care about it. And I frankly don't think that this is a place, Benton County, I'm representing the county here. Benton County should not serve as the regional landfill for the rest of the Willamette Valley. As a Benton County citizen, I'm speaking respectfully to you guys, I know what you're doing, and I think it's fine, okay, I understand it. I just think as a Benton County citizen, which is why I volunteered for this committee, I don't think Benton County, from a policy perspective and a character of our environment, should be doing that. On this committee, I will use my expertise to objectively evaluate things. But if you're asking this as, as a person, I think we need to look at other ways to handle solid waste, recycling, and think longer term, because, you're whether 6 years or 10 years or whatever it is. I mean, this is kind of a short-term thing we're looking at here. And what we think about whether, the DSAC's for it or against, I don't think that matters. I think that we need to give information to the planning commission that they can work with the commissioners on a broader long-term policy decision about what they want for Benton County. And if we can provide something that helps them out, like Charlie said, it's sitting on a wetland, okay? It's in a rural area. It's across from a wildlife area. I just think that there should be some other options that are looked at in the long term. How that affects this particular CUP is something that the county needs to decide. But eventually, we got to do something else.
Yeah, Robert.
I agree totally with David. For Benton County, this is a long-term issue. For the franchisee, it's a short-term issue. They've got, it's a business, and
It is a business.
And they have-
respect that.
and they've determined that it's economical to drive trucks a long way in Benton County for the trash. And I'm sure it does pencil out, and I don't know why.
It does, and I respect what you guys are doing. I'm not critical of that. I just think this is a county.
They've done a very good business, and you want a profitable business out there. You don't want to have somebody that's going bankrupt.
I was in business for a long time.
But yeah, it's a long-term decision for us, and I think we're kind of being forced down a short-term view of it. And I'm not quite sure what the hurry is. I mean, if you can always just bring a little less trash in from the outside and prolong it until we come up with other solutions. So, and maybe down the road, there has to be an expansion. I don't know, but it just seems like the last expansion we had, it was like 4 years and it's going to be full. And that didn't go through. And so we found out, well, it wasn't really 4 years. So I'd rather take a long-term look at it, and maybe we can provide some of the long-term perspective for the planning committee that potentially could help them and try to maybe take the urgency away. Now, they may be under, where they have to say yes or no based on some very specific criteria, and that might be, how does it affect a neighboring property? And I'm sure there's going to be local people commenting on that. With David, on the fire suppression, that's probably my biggest concern. And I think it's great that we're moving forward and we have different plans, but I'd like to actually see something in place for a year or two that's actually working and has actually been implemented before we could say, yeah, okay, we've got a plan. Instead of, the future is always going to be the future. And I think the expansion might be Benton County's only chance to, really get some specific things done ahead of time. So long-term is what I would think we can help them with, not short-term.
I believe that the planning commission will need any feedback that the DSAC wants to provide by April 17th before our next meeting.
Yeah. So, and then I think there's a hearing scheduled for April 28th. Is that right? 29th, thank you, April 29th. So, one thing we can do, I think written communication is always helpful, is target getting a short letter together for the planning commission by that, sorry, Bailey, you said April 18th? 17th, by that April 17th deadline. And then provisionally appoint someone to act as the DSAC representative at that hearing, and just present that information orally as well, and field any questions. You can also just do one of them and submit a letter in writing or just testify or something like that. But I think if we're going to go it was always going to be, we were always going to communicate facts, but if we were just going to be an informational body and give them information we think that would be relevant to their deliberations and thinking long-term, we should kind of figure out what those questions are this evening, so that whoever works on it has some marching orders. Paul, were you going to say something?
Oh, no.
Okay, sorry. So I would say the lifetime of the site as is, what it would be with the expansion proposal, which I believe is uncertain, right? Because then the cap would be lifted and you could bring in a lot more.
That's what the current permit, I believe.
That's the franchise agreement, right? Yeah. So I had a question about that, which was, can the planning commissions approve the expansion proposal with a condition that there actually a cap stays in place?
That would be a commission decision. I believe. I don't know.
Seems to think it's shaking your head back here.
I'm not really sure, we're talking about the cap, but I think the things maybe we should talk about are advise the commission on items that, we don't know if the cap's removed, if there will be a dramatic change. It might not be, it may stay the same, or just gradually go up like it's been going. Now, I don't know that just because the cap disappears, that tomorrow there'll be twice as much stuff put in the landfill. Okay.
Yeah, although looking at Paul's plot, like some significant fast jumps can
There was a
definitely
big one in
happen.
2017.
Yeah,
And they've been banging on the top ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that big jump in 2017 is due to another landfill closing,
Yeah.
River Bend and McMinnville, so that's why the big jump. And so, we're not out actively looking for volume because there's still, like an economy of how much is the cost to transport material? We don't transport material, it's third-party people that say, wow, I could go to Wasco County or I could go to Coffin Butte. Where's the rate and how much is it gonna cost me to get there? That's how they make the decisions. So we're not really chasing volume. If anything, what we chase is dirt because we need cover to cover the garbage. And so we do offer sometimes some better pricing on dirt because we're looking for dirt, but we're not out pulling volume from Seattle or anything like that. We feel like we've kind of got the region that we want. And yeah, it's gonna grow as they build homes and people move in. But I don't expect, don't quote me on this, but I don't expect any big jumps like you saw in 17. The reason that jumped is because of that other landfill closed.
I wonder now, that's an interesting point in the story. So we know we're not the only community with this problem. We know that every single landfill, every place has got the same problem. Pressure from a methane, this, New York Times article, thanks Ken for tracking that into the material. I actually looked at that, that there's a suggestion that we've been underestimating the landfill contribution. So every community is facing this problem, and a closure for whatever reason, because I don't know, Benton County a couple counties over decides, well, we're done, or, we're gonna close a landfill, and then there's this, where do we put this material? So this problem is gonna play out over and over again across the United States. And there's also those other pressures of, what do we do with the leachate? And nobody wants the leachate, nobody wants you probably don't want the biosolids back either. But everybody faces the exact same problem. And how do you treat, because we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but well, like many things in society, it's not unique here. The real cost is not known. The real costs aren't known, right? Where you're going to end up capping, whether it's 4 years from now or 6 years from now, and closing, landfill, or expanding yet again. Once you open up that side of why not do more, right? So it's never ending situation that Dave talked about. Like, unless we lead by example and say there's got to be a different way, because this way does not work, and the true costs are not necessarily falling on us tomorrow. But so when you go back to what's the commission facing, what's this undue burden? It's on whom and when, and it's just kicking the can down the road. So I absolutely agree, the long term. We don't have enough information to know what the true costs of continuing to use this type of protocol are for wherever the landfill is. We all face the same problem. And so we're, so much movement, and there's so much more. I mean, the literature on the landfill is just really, skyrocketing. And PFAS, okay, sure, it's just one small thing, but they're just independent molecules. There's tons of things, tons of metals. We know that, right? Tons of, literally, it's everything in the kitchen sink. And so this deferring the cost into the future, when it's capped, will be monitored for 30 years. Leachate develops, PFAS leach for a minimum of 40 years. These models now are just saying this goes on and on and on and on. And so when that's capped, it's Benton County and its residents that must assume whatever risks and costs become evident at that time. Our landfills, the Superfund sites of tomorrow. There's a very good chance, I think, a very high percentage of Superfund sites are landfills in the EPA database. So I like the idea of a long-term. I mean, we're all guilty of creating garbage. It's what's the 3 R's?
Reduce is one.
Reduce, reuse, recycle. There's a 4th one. Refuse. Don't buy it in the first place. And that it goes beyond this room, right? But it's a philosophy. Is Benton County going to lead and say, you start to think about, should I consume that? And that could start with this kind of pressure point. It could become a major thing, but it can't be pie in the sky, because it's a real problem.
Okay, so, well, first of all, I think we're starting to do a pretty good job of seeking out things that we need to improve. Okay, now, got one example, maybe two, and we can do that as a team. That may be half of our job, but is there a group in Benton County that is working on the other half, which is what the future should be like? If there isn't, maybe we should offer to do that for half of our time.
It's kind of a DSAC scope. I haven't shared what the county's been working on in that respect, because it kind of falls outside of DSAC scope. Yes, the county's initiated a solid waste management plan. We're coordinating with municipalities from Lane County north all the way to the coast. So that work is set to be completed at the end of June. And there's a bill right now, a House bill introduced by Sarah Finger McDonald, a local representative, that would create a state level sustainable materials management plan to build on the work that this group that's currently working has completed. So more to come on that, but yes, we have I was in a meeting the other day. We have an 86-page document that's all focused on the future and alternatives for the region.
Bailey, so that's really good to hear. How does this decision, or does it factor into that? Or is
It doesn't really,
Doesn't,
because
okay,
it's
so
really
that's-
looking at the long term. I mean, we know at some point Coffin Buttes gonna fill up, be that 12 years
Yeah.
or 18 years.
Whatever.
Regardless, the time to start planning for the next stage is now. Transfer stations take a long time to site and they're expensive to investment. Those are decisions above my pay grade for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, I
And
guess
that's why I hope the state, if this bill passes, will be able
well,
to take leadership.
that's good to hear as well. So that, I guess that's what I was getting at. If that group that you're working with has these plans, and we're gonna do transfer stations or something, but we can't implement that for 5, 10 years or whatever it happens to be. Does that then ripple back to this decision to approve the expansion or not, or?
I guess I'd say if it's not approved, that's gonna put a whole lot more pressure on not only Benton County, but all the counties that rely on Coffin Butte for their disposal. 100% of the waste from Tillamook County and much from Yamhill County, Lincoln County sends all 100% of their waste virtually.
Yeah, and that's what I'm coming from. So the statewide thing, I mean, I've always thought from day one, this is a statewide
Mhm.
thing, and the problem is kind of hitting this table here, or not here, but in Benton County, because Benton County's hosting it. But this is a broader decision. And so my previous little ditty that I said, as a citizen of Benton County, I hate to see Benton County be put in that position to have to make that decision for the rest of the, Western Oregon or whatever it is.
Well, it's a collaboration with.
And so, yeah, but right now we're faced with approving it or not approving it.
The Achilles heel is the 75,000 ton threshold by DEQ. Once you rise above that, you're regional landfill. Once you're regional landfill, you cannot discriminate with anybody coming into it under service transportation laws. So that's the Achilles heel. If everybody can reduce, like you did say, down to 75,000 tons, which I don't
You
know.
unring the bell?
Yeah, unring the bell, and then you have a county landfill. So I guess what we're saying is that the criteria that they have a finite area that they're looking at, and it's limited to that. And it says X, Y, Z. And I don't see how we can really add to that. In other words, is it zoned that? And then,
Yeah,
so.
no, I totally hear you, Chuck, and like, all of these big picture questions resonate with me, but at the end of the day, this is a land use decision.
Yeah.
And it's a single one, and it's based entirely on the land development code, it's.
Right.
The planning commissioners can have their own individual feelings about trash and where it should go. Is everything okay? Is it?
No.
Okay, sorry.
Beeping at me.
They can have, maybe similar feelings to us about what we should be doing and, how we shouldn't be using landfills and things like that. But they have a very narrow scope here. So the question is there input that we can give them that would help them within this very narrow constrained scope, make a decision?
Well, I mean, landfill is not the bucolic Benton County that everybody knows, but Benton County knows we also have residual waste. We have to deal with that residual waste. So that's really what we're looking at.
I'm not sure I follow. What do
Ah,
you mean?
good. That's that's the way to present
I think as a committee, if we want, we can tell the commissioners that we will continue to focus on doing our best to ensure that the landfill is compatible and with the county operations, so that, because, we've got roads that go by it, we've got concern for citizens that come to the landfill, safety of them and so forth. So those items that we're already responsible for, we'll continue to pursue. Now, we'll pursue that whether the expansion is approved or not. We'll still do that job.
Yeah, I don't think that we need to guarantee that we'll uphold our charter, though. That seems weird. Like, why wouldn't we? Sorry, Brett, did you have a
I
comment?
just have an odd question.
Yeah.
So if, let's say the landfill closes in 13, 20, 30 years, whatever that is. After closure, is there a disposal site advisory committee?
It's a good question.
No, okay,
No,
okay, I was just curious.
Well, I don't know, because how long after it's closed is there still operations there to seal and contain the landfill? And we still need to monitor to ensure that it's staying within the confines. So I don't know, but it would seem to me that there still would be a committee.
I thought I heard that was a 30-year agreement after closure.
That's a required minimum 30
Yeah,
years
so
after.
I think it'd still be in existence. Besides, I don't think that the PRC is going to close just because the landfill closes, if that were the case. So we haven't really addressed anything at the PRC at this point.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the closure is included in our charter, so I don't know if it's, I don't know how it's codified. But David, like something you said, I mean, we could just kind of summarize for the planning commissioners the kinds of concerns that we've been seeing raised.
Yeah, from the public and.
Yeah. I mean,
observations.
they're going to be getting a lot of them anyway, so I don't know how useful that would be, but.
True.
Yeah, it seems kind of specific. Use adjacent, the use does not seriously interfere with uses on adjacent property or with the character of the area. That, I mean, I don't know if a committee could necessarily determine that. An individual could, if that's their property next door, and they could, make an argument for it.
Yeah, I mean, the planning commission, definitely has to figure that out, right?
Yeah,
Like that's
but
their
that's
whole
like,
decision.
that's one of the two criteria that they have to look at.
Yeah, yeah.
When property is contaminated, I don't know if you've ever done much with forensics and litigation of contaminated areas. There's a question of reduced property values. And we know there are both aerosol and gas emissions from landfills. And I would suspect that, and there's plenty of data that indicates that the areas around landfills have gradients of contaminants that are being emitted and then deposit with distance over time. So that's understood. And so I wonder from a undue burden kind of thing, if being able to sell your property in the future, if you're close or adjacent or downwind, becomes a factor. Because, PFAS is a good example where, when you have to remediate, you have to assign responsibilities. But if there is no party because landfill's been closed forever, right? Then does that burden fall to the homeowner when they're trying to sell or transfer that property? And I'm no specialist there, but I can certainly appreciate the footprint. We don't know what that is. It is not zero. We know that. You can see it in deposition of vegetation around landfills and also onto soil. So, yeah.
Well, the county commissioners, if they're worried about the finances, they have to weigh the income that's coming from the siting versus any reduction in maybe property taxes coming from adjacent properties that may be devalued. Okay, and then that would be the financial observation. I think I don't know for sure because I haven't done a computation on it, but I know that they don't get any income from the wetland. That's federal land or state land that doesn't have property tax. So with that in mind, I think that their net observation of financials is it's a positive income for the county. Okay, and it's true that a small number of residents around the landfill are going to have possibly a property devaluation and difficulty selling. But I think from the county commissioners, I don't know, I don't know if they're looking at that too or not in the planning commission. But I would think that they would be looking at both the financial and the social aspects, the social being the county itself, and the two key points. So I think there is a third one in there, and that has to do with whether or not it's a revenue resource for the county.
I would think the planning commission would be looking at that. I mean, I would think just houses in that proximity, is the landfill or the expansion, would that have a value or have a impact on the value of that property?
Oh.
Yeah, I would think so, because I've thought about all those new tract homes that are going out there in Adair Village, which is, a couple of miles from the landfill, I guess. And does that, I just crossed my mind as I drive by there. It's like, because I live out near there too. Does that have an effect on that? Yeah, I'm out there, you head out to the landfill and take a right, and I'm the third house on the left, kind of thing. But I don't know. And I'm not trying to be funny about it really, but I would think that would be a consideration by the planning commission.
Yeah, hopefully we wouldn't get people moving in and go, what, there's a landfill there? Because it's there.
Well, we've been watching it.
It's like moving in near an airport and complaining about the noise, so.
Yeah.
But what people may not know is whether the extent, and I don't think we know, is the extent to which groundwater, air, and vegetation are contaminated. I don't think there's enough data on this particular location. There are data on other systems that says that's a thing. We just don't have, that I'm aware of, the data that goes with that. We learned on that tour that we took that shoot, what's the tree? The
Poplar trees.
The poplar trees right there, that at one point, something was sprayed on the ground there. What was that? What was the material? And that's why the poplars were planted there. It's a phytoremediation effort. So at some point, was it leachate?
I believe there was land application there about
And
18, 20 years ago.
The fellow on the tour who was giving us a tour told us about that, which suggests that's a hot spot, but how are you gonna know, right? But there was an action taken and that's why the poplars are there.
Right.
They're big hydrostatic pumps. They pull, phytoremediation is a real big thing. I don't know, 10, 15 years ago.
The reason I brought up the financial aspect based upon what David was commenting was only that there's cost to the county. Reduction in property values is probably not a major
Not to the
cost.
county, but to homeowners in that.
Yeah, each individual homeowner may see, but you see, I don't pay property taxes on the tune of $3 million. Okay, I don't think anybody does. And I think that there's only about a dozen houses that are in this region, so we're not gonna see that number.
So it's the county's bottom line, not
Yeah,
burden on
the county's bottom
individuals.
line is what they're probably more worried about. But there is also any adjustments that need to be made to county operations, okay? Which, like the fire department and roads and so forth, okay? And that is their financial picture. Then there's the adjacent landowners' input, and then there's the entire county's situation. People in Corvallis and all other areas that are highly populated in the county have a low-cost refuse service, okay, compared to people that live in other counties because they don't have to pay for transportation, comparatively speaking. So they may look at that, and I think people that aren't really close to the landfill benefit from it being close by.
Say that again?
I think people that are not very close to the landfill, I mean, not within, let's say, 2 miles, benefit from having a landfill that's within like 5 miles of their location.
Do you see that as a benefit?
Yeah,
Because their costs are lower, garbage.
so I think that's, the commissioners are gonna look at the county, not at just the smallest portion of the county. Okay, and so, somebody gets a landfill, I happen to be lucky, I have one near me. Okay, and so do you. Okay, but not everybody gets a landfill. Okay, so that's why we call it a society. We kind of do things as a group. Okay, so, but our job is to do our best to ensure that the landfill, I guess, is a good citizen to the environment and the persons of the county. And I think we're doing a pretty good job on a few things, and we've got a list of others we can work on. But we should do it as a cooperation, a team effort, I think. So I'm not sure, what you want to put to the commission, because we're the Benton County Disposal Site Advisory Committee. Okay.
Yeah, well, we're running very low on time. I think that we are just constrained more than anything by practicality at this point. We just don't have time to put anything together as a committee. So my proposal would be that we just, if we feel individually that we would like to submit public comment, to do so. I would request that if you do so, make it clear that you're not speaking on behalf of DSAC. But I think the Planning Commission would welcome input from all of us on the matter, and would like to hear our perspectives. But I think as a committee, we just don't have time to put something together without crazy, like hastily scheduled Zoom meetings and things that I don't think would really be too much of a benefit. And I think, David, you're right. Like we're, our remit is really one more of like monitoring and working with the site owners more than anything else. So does that sound all right for everyone? We'll just kind of go our own ways with this one. Does anyone have any objections?
Let me just state it another way to make sure that it's clear for at least me.
Yeah.
So what you're proposing is that DSAC would not provide any comment letter to the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
Because it's outside of our mission and scope to do that, because we're more, as David suggested, working with collaboratively with Republic on just ongoing stuff? Or is it that I'll stop right there. Is that it?
I would make one suggestion. I just realized that we are the public's input for operations at the landfill, right?
For operations.
We get all of the input. So I think maybe we should at least send a summary of the input we've received.
I think we should send something. I guess I'm not comfortable not doing anything, because right there's a great example. And I have been confused for a while, what is it we're supposed to do with this whole expansion thing? Because, part of it is like, look at groundwater stuff and does that look good and all of that, but that doesn't really have much to do with the expansion proposal that's on the table. That's another department. But I think what David suggested is, at least as a minimum, would be what we ought to do. So they have it, they probably already have it, but if they don't, at least it formalizes it.
They might not have it. I mean, we usually just report those to the department.
They should have it.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing we should supply, and not, because we're going to work on ensuring that the landfill, like I said before.
Yeah.
I think we continue to do that. All we can do is ensure that the public commentary was conferred to the Planning Commission.
Yeah. Dave, I wouldn't say that it's like outside of our remit to to weigh in on this, but, there are concerns that there's like a conflict of interest of having a
Well, that's
public
what I
person on the
wondered about,
committee.
Rachel, because,
Yeah.
as a citizen, I spoke my piece, as a long-term citizen of Benton County, I just don't think it's appropriate for the county to host a regional landfill here. And that's just me, okay? But I don't know that that's this committee.
Did the planning commission sent a letter, and within that letter, they set the criteria. Was that your interpretation? Because if you accept their letter as the criteria, then it gets back down to that small scope.
Yeah, so this was sent by the chair of the planning commission.
Right, but you didn't interpret it, that's the way we had to respond, did you?
I asked him what criteria the planning commission would use to make its decision, because I figured that that would be the most helpful way to focus our input. Paul?
Real quick, as a representative, something you just said, this committee, this group here could put whatever you want forward with the notification that the representative from Republic has abstained from any input into this letter, plain and simple. So there's no conflict of interest or kind of like any view of impropriety or influence or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what this committee,
That's fair.
outside of me, wants to decide. That's
fair.
prerogative.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's because I'm not here to influence. I'm here as a neutral person from this perspective for this discussion. So.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. All right, so the idea, the proposal is to write a letter summarizing what kind of public input we've gotten regarding the site. Just outlining it. I think we could go back over the last few years of reports and just draw from Bailey's.
Why not just submit the reports in case they don't have them? Because if I do the math, the 17th is 9 days from now. Is that right? 9 days? And we can't work in another medium. Where's the time to work on anything?
We can work in we can work in another medium. We just can't work as a full committee and make decisions. So we could appoint a subcommittee to work on a letter and deputize them to send it.
Well, there's your subcommittee because I'm not there. So you can.
I want to say it feels like we've abdicated our duty. The problem is I don't know what our duty was. We've spent, I've been on this committee since July. I now even more so do not know what our job is. It doesn't feel like we have one. And if it's to figure out if, the scales aren't quite working right and then that little building isn't staffed quite right, you don't need me on this committee. I have nothing to contribute. It's a business. They know how to run it. It stinks occasionally. What are we gonna do? I just don't know what our duty is.
Do we have a charter that outlines everything?
Yeah, we do.
I don't think I've ever seen one.
And now we're,
Bylaws and everything.
if it was so clear, we would not be here where we are today. We would have known what we were doing many, many, many months ago.
Well, I think from the beginning of the year, one of her statements, I think one of the things that Rachel said was to drive this in a different direction, a more positive and collaborative effort, which maybe was not there beforehand. I can't speak to that. But I think from what I've watched on videos previously to where we are now, I think this is a more comprehensive unit. We're having very valid adult conversations and deep in thought. We're thinking deeper. We're not screaming at each other or whatever. So to my perspective, from what I watched in previous years to where we are now, I think this is a much better position for this committee. But
I'm glad to hear that. And I don't want to diminish the fire thing. I live less than 5 miles away. I deeply appreciate that, but that is so much easier to address than some of the bigger issues we're talking about. And we are probably, like many other groups, nearly paralyzed in our ability to address the bigger issues. We might not have been tasked with the bigger issues.
I think we ought to go ahead and take one of these other bigger issues now that we've had success on this less, this more obvious what to do about it issue, and take some, work on that next. if our job, and I think our job is advisory committee for the disposal site, and we know that like, either PFAS or leachate, plume or whatever is, or aerosols or odor, those are like some of them that come to mind to me. We could decide on what we can do about it. I'm not gonna pick on PFAS because I'm way inexperienced in that field, but I will say, for example, odors, which practically anybody can smell things. And so now, but the question is, where is it coming from? Okay, and it might not be the landfill, it might be something else. Okay, and if it is the landfill, what is it? Okay, and can we do anything about it? But, right now we know there's odors.
And to your point, David, and here's something that I'm willing to share. It's no problem if people want to ask me. We have accelerated our well installation.
Yeah.
We usually do it July, August. We just finished installing 16 new wells in the old upper deck that we're turning on probably Thursday and Friday. The next 2 days, we're going to be adding 16 more wells to our 350 plus wells to give us better coverage. So that's something I think this committee should be aware of, and that's stuff that could be asked of me. Hey, what are you doing? This or that. And I'm more than happy to address those. And I will give you the answers. If I don't have the answers, I will find the answers for this committee. So,
well, then you got the well and you can take a sample from the well, and you can use that sample to analyze. Okay, we can go down that path too, to see whether or not our expectation of a potential problem that we need to deal with exists, or at what level it's at.
yeah, we can have those conversations.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're running past time. So I just want to address one thing. Jennifer, I totally hear you. I think some of these big picture questions are probably solid waste advisory committee things, that Bailey is working on. But we do have an actual charter that comes from state law. And I'll share it over email, but one of the things we're supposed to do is provide a forum for citizen comments, but we are basically supposed to review with the permittee, the public, the siting, operation, closure, and long-term monitoring of the site. That's it. That's what we are on. So these big questions about waste, solid waste, where it goes, what we do with it are different, I think. So just coming back to the expansion proposal real quick, so we can hopefully make a decision. We've got an idea on the table to write a letter to the Planning Commission summarizing the nature of the public comment that we've gotten over the years regarding the site. Bailey.
I am not a planner, although I work with a lot of them in my office, but it's my understanding that looking at the current landfill, that's not something the Planning Commission is going to take into consideration. So if you want to send them the reports about past complaints, that's fine, but I don't know that it's going to influence their decision, because they're purely focused on the expansion, not current operations or past.
Wouldn't it at least give them an idea of that they could expect more of similar complaints with?
Yeah, I'm not saying not to do it, just I don't know that it's going to be that influential in the decision making.
I recommend that a note be sent with the summary. Make it a short discussion so it doesn't get complicated, and just point out this is where we stand at this point. And so you're looking at either, if the landfill stays at the current capacity, we'll still get this.
Yeah.
Bailey, I'll respectfully disagree with you just a little bit, is that I do think some of those comments, because one of the criteria were seriously interfere with the character of the area, right? I think that's one of them, which, I mean, this is all real subjective stuff. Like, what does that mean? I would think that those comments, there could be some in there that address that influence that a little bit. Like, there's odors that happen on warm days, or there's, I see things on the side of the character, just the visual effect there. I read a couple of them, people walking in E. Wilson and looking over there. I see that too. And it's like, wow, that's real different than a wildlife area. I do think there's something there about impact to the character of the area that might be helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
That you could pull out of those comments.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a lot there that's relevant to their criteria.
Is it okay to ask the chair to summarize and send?
No,
Chair's not.
Okay.
I would entertain a volunteer to do so. I cannot do so.
Well, I'm not gonna be here. I can't either.
I'll help the chair. That's all I'll do. I won't do it by myself.
I've got a trip coming up. Let me see. We only have like a week, right? I mean, so someone's gonna flip this around. And if Paul recuses himself or abstains from it, could we send it around to everybody but Paul? Sorry, buddy.
Not to edit. We can't make decisions on it. So we could have a subcommittee of like 3 people that review it and send it in.
Or we can have everyone meet one more time to look at it next week for 5 minutes and yay or nay it, if that's possible.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I'm not available.
Yeah, with David Heflin said he's not available. I think we should just, if everyone's comfortable with it, appoint a subcommittee to work on this and submit it and just deputize them to do so. Does anyone have any objections to that idea?
I don't object.
Charlie, if you draft something, I can take a look at it and edit it. Would you be okay with that arrangement?
Yeah, I guess so. I would really like to see the former board commissioner person of the planning commission that was referred to earlier, that email. Bailey, can you send that to me?
Yes.
And then what we're talking about is pulling out comments specifically, or what are we looking at this letter saying?
Yeah, I think it should be summarizing the kinds of public comments we've gotten, maybe pulling out an example or 2 of ones that seem particularly salient. And then maybe we can just attach the annual, like a few of the annual reports to our letter or something like that as just backup. But basically a cover letter to sending the annual reports explaining that we get all of these comments and here's a few relevant to the criteria you're considering.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would be glad to review as well.
Okay, all right, so maybe we'll just continue our subcommittee of Dave and Charlie and me.
Okay.
Everybody comfortable with giving us authority over putting something together and sending it to the planning commission? Okay. All right, we're running over, so I'm just gonna skip to wrapping things up. If you have any requested agenda items, please just email me and Bailey and we'll see about putting them on the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you all.
Thanks for helping out with that.
I didn't mean to impede you at all. It's just there had been some discussion, you are opposed to this, that was. That land use,
I'm new in this area, so all
Yeah,
these
so-
acronyms are.
Yeah, so I'm worried that if you weigh in, that would be an automatic,
Believe me, I do not want to get involved.
Really happy to hear it.
Anywhere near.
I just wanted to clarify.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. We're on the same page. I just, yeah, this is
To have a good conversation.
there's a feeling that
I'm so glad you guys.
we could influence, or whether it be public or acne or whatever, we're just part of this community. I don't know if it's what the past is, what kind of, but sure, I'm joking with that. I've been here since June,
I don't
so
care.
it's just, I'm trying to say everything.
I don't want this to end up, you know, in
No.
terrible. And I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, no worries, no worries, I'm not mad, I sort of stuck, thanks for speaking up on this.
Yeah.
You know, you're up your base, you know.
That's good.
What was confrontation?
I've had a letter for 12 years.
Well, this is my retirement, unless they don't like me, I'm retiring here. 15 years.
So,
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, I think we're doing.
We don't see these plates.
Everybody has their opinion, but so
it's interesting for me that some county.
Okay.
Are we still recording?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Whatever I say, I don't care if it's public, because I do that. You should shut it off.
so that's where I have a pretty strong opinion.
But,
The expansion, because they're moving
you know,
closer to my property.
this isn't the kind of